I'm Rachel.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome back to Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
This week, we'll still be talking about the government shutdown, and then we'll have an interview with Mike Levin and answer all of your questions about our life on the Hill.
Welcome back, everybody. It is Groundhog Day on Capitol Hill, and that is a pretty outdated movie if you haven't seen it, but I think everybody recognizes the phrase, and it basically just means that we, reporters, lawmakers, staffers, are just going through the same crap every single day. And
Coming up on
so exhausting.
3 weeks of the same thing every day.
And it's awful because there's nothing happening and everything happening at the same time. And it feels like when you're doing these updates, when we do it on the show, that seems to be all we talk about. But then when you actually dive into it, a lot of what's happening right now is nothing.
Yeah.
It's press conferences about what each party is messaging on. Okay, well, we already know that.
I could get up there and give every press conference for them.
I don't have to go to the press conference to know what they're going to say. And that is what is so frustrating about it, because you want to go. Because as reporters, we need to be at the press conference, especially when half of the members aren't there. Like Republicans, most of them aren't here. And so that is our opportunity to get leadership and to maybe get like another member.
Yeah.
And everyone's also going after the same 5 people. So like when we're in the halls of the Capitol,
It's so like
you're boxed out all the time because everybody's asking a question. Most of the time you're lucky. Some people are asking the same questions. Like
Which is honestly, in a shutdown fight, it is the same questions, because like all of us are just looking at the same thing. Like we said, it's Groundhog Day. So like they're all going to be asking the questions that we're going to be asking. So in this instance, it's weird because usually getting boxed out does mean that like you don't have answers to a certain story that you're doing. But in this instance, like even if you're boxed out, you're going to get the answers.
Yeah, you're going to hear it. And I think that that's what's just so kind of mundane about this job right now. And like, to be quite frank, like I'm so burnt out.
Yeah.
And you know, that's nothing probably compared to like the staffers who aren't getting paid or the lawmakers who want to come back to town. Obviously, we do not have the same struggles as they do. But I think from a journalistic standpoint, like I think a lot of us are burnt out because we're all trying to chase stories. And more often than not, the answers that we're getting from lawmakers are, we don't know. We have no idea. There's no update. There's no plan. And so it's kind of disheartening because most of our job is to find the update before it's out there.
Yeah.
And if the people that we're interviewing don't even know what's going on, then how the hell are we supposed to know?
Our burnout comes from, obviously, both sides have to message anything that they're messaging. It doesn't matter what the issue is. There's messaging for everything. But our job is not to write messaging. Like,
no,
we
are not your oppo.
Exactly. If I wanted to write stories just on messaging, then I would have gone into comms.
Yeah, I would be your staffer. I'd be your press secretary.
And like, that is great. Like, comms is so necessary. That is not dogging on comms at all.
No.
But this cycle has been so hard as a reporter to break through on that messaging.
Yes,
and I think
absolutely.
that the only way that we've been able to do that is through talking on background with staffers.
Yeah.
Like, I really think that that's the only way. And I mean, we have gotten some good stuff from staffers. I think that as a staffer, it is so hard right now. These staffers are working their usual days. The shutdown is very grueling for all of us, or like tiresome, just because, like we said, it's Groundhog Day. But they're not getting paid.
No.
They will get back pay, but all of their staff comes, or most of their staff comes to the Hill every day, and they work their normal jobs, and they are not receiving their paychecks like federal workers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do see that, like, it's also tiresome for them, and I get why some of them are willing to yap about it.
No, honestly, and I think that a lot of people, and this kind of also ties into for like federal workers, why some people out in states that are not in like the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, they're like, why should we care about federal workers? Like, they're the bureaucrats, like we need less of them. Like they don't care. Most people in the country don't care about federal workers. But then, as we also have talked about in previous episodes, like there are places in states that you would not think that have a ton of federal workers, and they're also not getting paid. And so like staffers on Capitol Hill, like you might view them through a different lens when you don't live here. You might be like, oh, they're just like staffers. Like, they're just answering phone calls. And like, not to be like shameless staffer plugs. Like, we have friends who are staffers. We have, partners who are staffers. And I think that it's very stressful for them because like, it's not like your apartment building is going to take a government shutdown as an excuse to not pay rent. And so I think I agree that a lot of them are starting to feel this fatigue where they're like, I'm getting really worried because I don't have enough money to pay more than 1 month's rent. And I think that that is something that is one of those consequences, and we've talked about that before, where there's not a ton of consequences for a shutdown in the beginning. Mm-hmm. It's all messaging, it's all just like mudslinging, and then you think it's going to be over. Mm-hmm. But then as it continues, I mean, we're on day 20, and there's no negotiations, there's no agreement, there's no way out. And so now it's like, oh, well, we're 20 days in, everyone's exhausted with hearing the same thing, and at the same time, now we're feeling the after effects, where we're not getting paid, we can't do our jobs, people are trying to appropriate. Which is supposed to be what this whole fight is about. And I think that that's another thing too, is that people are kind of losing the goalpost here of like what this whole thing is about. The whole thing is about funding the government, and it's been turned into something else by both sides.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that for staffers, like obviously all federal workers are dealing with missing rent payments, and that is so tough. There are so many people that live paycheck to paycheck. I know that rent in D.C. is high. I know that rent in a lot of places that have federal workers is high, but I think that a lot of the fatigue coming from staffers that is a little bit different than the rest of the federal workforce is that their bosses and the people they are working for, the people that they are doing ledge for, doing comms for, like, they are the ones that are supposed to be funding the government and keeping it open. So it is technically part of their job to do this. And, like, it is just all at a halt. And I mean, we've done this for almost 3 weeks now, and there has not been movement. And I think that that is just disheartening for everyone involved, because it's like, how are we just like barreling forward towards this huge, like 35 days is the record. We're barreling forward towards this record, and there's just like, we're at a standstill.
And I think what's really interesting for us, and that's kind of goes back to where we're trying to chase a story that really isn't there, is rank and file lawmakers don't know what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
They don't have the answers.
No.
So when we're trying to like reach out to these members being like, hey, what have you heard? What are these discussions? Most of the time their answers to me, and I think to you as well, have been, we don't know, we're waiting for leadership. Yeah. But then you go and you listen to leadership press conferences, and then leadership is saying, we don't have an answer for you either. And so like you listen to Republican leaders, they just say, we don't have any idea when it's going to end. That's on the Democrats. Mm-hmm. And the Democrats will have their leadership press conferences, and Jeffries will say, we have the idea. You guys just need to come meet us halfway. It's like, well, they're not moving. You're not moving. So where's the conversation? And I think that I agree. I think staffers are looking at their bosses thinking, you're the ones who are supposed to be doing your job so I can do my job, and you're not doing it. So not only is it like they're feeling fatigue from maybe the other party, but they're also looking at their bosses like, hey man, what the heck?
Yes. And I mean, I think that they just like don't really know where this is going, whereas staffers typically know where things are going.
Yeah.
And at this point, just like no one knows where it's going. And so it's just, I mean, the House is in much more of a standstill than the Senate as of now. Like the bill sits in the Senate, the House is technically in recess. Democrats have been up at the Capitol talking as much as they can do.
Just
I think
yapping. Like honestly, they could come on our show and do the yap portion of our show. Yeah. And just honestly, we could do it for them. We could tell you everything they were going to say, because that's all they are doing is just talking, and they're trying their best to get some sort of messaging out there. And they've said, like, do we really know if these press conferences are hitting the American people? Maybe. Like, how many Americans are just like watching C-SPAN at 2 p.m.?
Tim Burchett said to me last week, he said that he wasn't invited to the press conferences.
That's so funny.
But that they would get a lot more views if he was there. And I was like, I love that. I saw him there. I asked him what he's doing in his, I mean, technically recess, even though the government shut down. And I was hoping he would say this. He makes skateboards. He said that he's been making skateboards after hours.
Yay.
And so he's been home doing that, which is so fun.
That's hilarious.
I love, this is what I love about covering Congress. I love their little quirks that all of them have, because like truly they are people. That is what we're here trying to convey.
Yeah.
And like learning about them as people is one of my favorite things. So whenever they give me a very human answer, I love that.
It's so fun. And I think, again, it does go back to the fact that these are just regular people who can't have a conversation. Think about every fight you've had with a friend where you're trying to come to some sort of solution and you can't because you're both not listening to each other. Mm-hmm. It is truly like 16-year-old girls or 16-year-old boys trying to come to an agreement right now. Like, that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, I mean, we have been to all of the press conferences. We did a story last week on Groundhog Day, and we opened it with Johnson opening his day 15 press conference, being like, it's day 15 of the Democrat shutdown. And then literally 2 hours later in the same room, Jeffries opened his press conference. It's day 15 of the Republican shutdown, and that just goes to show like how separated they are when they are literally so close. Like they are in the same room.
They're in the same
mere
room
hours apart, and they are both talking, and like no one is hearing.
No one's listening. I think that's the thing that people have been reaching out to me and asking. They're asking, hey, is the shutdown still happening? I'm like, yeah. They're like, is there any movement? No. And I had a person ask me, she was like, you know, where do we go from here? And I said, truthfully, I hate to be this way, but we don't know. We don't know because nobody's listening to each other. And I think they're negotiating and legislating through the media right now, which is like half of what we're there for, is to do that. But I also think that they're doing too much messaging of the same talking points. And it's not just them. Like, the leaders will open the press conference and they will say their piece. Then they have 3 other people behind them who basically just reiterate everything that they just said.
They're way longer than they need to be.
And they're way longer than they need to be. And I understand because each member needs their own clips.
I do get it.
I get it. And I am not I'm not unsympathetic to like what comms people need to do. And it's not even really the comms people's decision either. It's the leaders who want to say this, and so then they help figure it out. But I think that what is just being exhausting is you get into the room and then, you know, the leader opens the press conference and then they're done. And then you just see all the reporters just kind of go and deflate. Because then for the next 20 minutes, it's 3 other people saying the same thing. And it's Republicans and Democrats. It doesn't matter what party. They both do it. And so I think that that's where people are getting frustrated.
Yeah.
If they are tuning in, you know, if regular American people are tuning in every day and they're really getting into it, and they just keep opening the same thing all the time. Yeah. We've had some lawmakers tell us that they think that that's helpful, that it just kind of gives stability in such a chaotic time right now.
And like the more that they yell, the more that it reaches people, which I do understand.
Which it's an effective strategy.
I mean, that is the game of politics. Like, people get elected when they have high name recognition. High name recognition comes from more exposure. That
being loud,
definitely
being on
just
social
relays
media.
right into messaging. More exposure to messaging just gets their message further. So like, I do get it, but also, like you said, lack of movement. And I mean, that's not the only thing with lack of movement on the Hill.
There's so many things that are not moving.
Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva, she got elected last month in Arizona. Her election was certified last week. She still has not been sworn in. Johnson has had a couple different arguments. He said that he wants to give her the same celebration that all members get, with all the members on the floor, pomp and circumstance. Her family up in the balcony. He painted the whole picture at the press conference, and then Democrats came in, and I talked to Congressman Greg Stanton, and he was like, no, if she doesn't want that pomp and circumstance, then she doesn't need that. She wants to work for her constituents, and if she doesn't want that, then Johnson should respect that. And so, I mean, we've talked about her election multiple times on here, and just like that, there's no movement. That goes right along with the Epstein files vote. We have talked about the discharge petition to force a vote on the full release of the Epstein files, which is a bill introduced by Congressman Massey and Congressman Ro Khanna, a Democrat and Republican. She is the 218th signature that they need to force a vote on that bill. And so without her swearing in, the Epstein files the Epstein file bill also says stalled.
Yes.
So we are just stalled.
The only thing that's different that I've heard is that she said that she got the keys to her office finally. There's no internet. There's no phones. Her staffers had to bring in their own printers and their own computers because they have nothing. So, and she took over the office of her father, who she is replacing when he passed away. And so that part was very sentimental and very nice. So she at least got to be in the office. But she said right now it's just an office. There's no, we can't help constituents. 700,000 Arizonans or however many are in the district don't have anyone to reach out to for services. And so I think that she is getting visibly frustrated, and so are the Democrats. They're getting very visibly frustrated that this keeps happening, and we're on day
outspoken, and
they're very
frustrated.
And you had mentioned about how loudness brings exposure, and so last week Democrats kind of marched to Speaker Johnson's office to demand that he swear her in. Well, there was a lot of things wrong with that demonstration. First of all, they did it when Johnson wasn't even there. He was at the White House. So that was kind of just not helpful because it wasn't like he was going to come out and give them the visual fight that they were looking for.
Yeah.
Nor maybe would have he come out had he been there. We aren't going to know. The other thing, too, was that at one point, one of the members got into an argument with a Capitol police officer.
Yeah.
And someone put it on social media because they were literally wanting everyone. They had every camera there. So it was not surprising. And I was there. I was in the back. And I did hear someone yelling. But I thought that they were yelling, she's a member of Congress, like, as in Grijalva. Like, she's a member of Congress, swear her in. When I watched the video, I realized it was not that. It was a congresswoman yelling at a Cap police officer being like, let me in, I'm a member. But members aren't really allowed to go to this. It was pretty bad optics, in my opinion. I think the intent behind it was great. Good. Yeah. The Women's Caucus was like, we want to add this great woman to our caucus, and she should be. And I just think that the demonstration there maybe just didn't hit the mark as much as it did, as a demonstration did when Mike Lawler and Jeffries got into it. That was a very viral video that happened. I don't think the Women's Caucus, and it wasn't because of them. There were many people there, but I think it was just because of the way that it was done and who was there and the timing. I think it didn't really meet the moment.
I think that something that has met the moment, though, is going back to Congressman Massey, who was the original writer of the Epstein Files release bill with Ro Khanna. He last week broke his fundraising record for Q3, or not even Q3, for any quarter, but it was his Q3 fundraising, which is honestly huge.
That's crazy.
Trump does not like Massey. The whole entire White House does not like Massey.
The House GOP leadership doesn't really like Massey. I mean, they've told me that they don't get along with him policy-wise, but personally they do. And I'm like, I don't not believe you, but nothing in public has made me think that is true. He is a thorn, for sure.
He's well known for voting against specific bills like President Donald Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill earlier this year. Stuff like government funding. He is doing stuff like trying to force a vote on the Epstein Files. Trump aides have started PACs to unseat him. Trump has made posts just calling him weak, calling for him to be unseated.
Whatever you think a Trump post about Massey would be is what it was.
And so with him being so in the news, I mean, not only for Epstein Files, but for other things like voting against government funding bills, for him to surpass a fundraising record, I think does show that his constituents and his base do support what he's doing for the most part, which I do think is kind of a diss to Trump in a way, just because he has split so firmly with the president in a way that we haven't really seen other members do yet. So I would say that is maybe one of the most notable things in the whole Epstein realm of things, even though that's not directly related to Epstein. I think that is maybe some of the most movement we've seen in there within the past week or so.
I would agree, and I think that Trump very rarely has people go against him as of late. That's just kind of how the Republican Party is. And I think that Massey is one of the very few lawmakers who can speak so directly out about the president or indirectly or about House leadership and still make that fundraising record or break it.
Yeah.
I don't think you would see very many people doing that and having that much success if it wasn't for his base. Because, he's been kind of a thorn in the side for a while, and his base keeps electing him.
I think he comes off as authentic. I've talked to people like my friends that live across the country who like him, and they follow politics pretty closely. And what they like about him is that he is not just going to go with the flow of the party. And I do think that there's a massive group of American people that respect that in a member, because a lot of people do not like the institution of Washington.
Yeah.
That is a pretty common thing. And that is what people liked about President Trump whenever he first came into politics. He kind of went against the grain of the institution. And I think that Massey kind of has that same pull whenever you watch him.
I agree.
Closer. And I do think, I talk to Massey a good amount, and I think that he firmly believes everything that he says. He is one of those members that everything is coming out of his mouth that there's no question that I think that he thinks it's true.
Yeah. And he's very candid with reporters.
Yeah.
And he's very candid just in general, and that's very like refreshing to see somebody who is like that, because I agree. I think that a lot of people around the country think that both parties just have this mob mentality where you're just going to go along with them because you're a Democrat. You're just going to go along with them because you're a Republican. And then you have these pockets of members who come out against their party pretty frequently. And then not only are they not afraid to do so, they don't back down after the first try. But then they surpass fundraising records, or they get a ton of views and follows in social media. And you start to notice that a lot of these people are kind of breaking through because they no longer are fitting that mold that the party has for them right now.
Well, thank you for joining us, Congressman Levin, for Capitol Conversations this week. Obviously, we've been busy with the past few weeks with government shutdown stuff. Can you just talk to me a little bit about why government shutdown is when Democrats have been using their leverage in these negotiations that haven't necessarily been happening, but what y'all are trying to do?
Well, thank you, Lauren and Rachel, for having me. I will just tell you we're now 15 days in, and it's a very sad state of affairs around here because we are here ready to negotiate, but my Republican colleagues are not, and they weren't here last week or the week before that. And I don't think we've had a vote in a number of weeks. I heard yesterday that Congress has only been in session something like 19 out of the last 104 days, which y'all could look to see if that's a record or not. But it certainly, to me, seems to be an abdication of the responsibility that we have to represent our constituents well. And at the end of the day, that's what this is about. It's about our constituents being able to afford health insurance. And, just in California, we're talking about roughly 600,000 Californians. These are American citizens who are going to be priced out of their health insurance that they get through Covered California. That's our ACA exchange. I know the numbers are between 4 and 5 million across the country if we can't come to some sort of resolution. And there are Republicans and Democrats alike who want to fix this, want to resolve this issue to prevent that from happening. But the reality is that Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune are unwilling to engage in any kind of negotiation around how we fix it. Speaker Johnson has said, well, we can do that later, but that's not going to work. My constituents in California are going to be receiving letters. Today's October 15. They're going to get letters today saying that their premiums in many cases will double. In some cases, might even more than double if the tax credits are not extended. And then open enrollment is in November. So the decision to delay has really hurt families all across this country. And I just wonder what Mike Johnson says to the constituents he has there in Shreveport, Louisiana. They're hurt by this just like everybody else.
And I think that's interesting because you had said that, Republicans are not here. Oh, I froze. I'm back. The Republicans are not here right now. And so Democrats kind of every single day have been kind of drawing attention to this healthcare fight that you guys are trying to have. Do you get the sense that your caucus still has the same energy that it did on day one? Because we're kind of living this Groundhog Day situation where, it's staffers, it's lawmakers, even some reporters are feeling the fact that just every day is the same. It's the same talking points. Do you think that those talking points are getting to the American people who want to know, why is my government not working right now?
First, what I would say, Rachel, is if I were a Republican member of the House, a rank and file member of the House, I would be furious that my leadership, Speaker Johnson in this case, has kept me from Washington, D.C. now for 3 or 4 weeks while the government is shut down and while the ACA tax credit issue hangs in the balance without any even beginning of a good faith negotiation. And in fact, Kevin Kiley, member from California. I don't always agree with Kevin, but on this we certainly agree. He said that Johnson's strategy here to keep his members home was really, really off. I can tell you on the House Democratic side, we're here in large numbers again this week, and we're united in saying very loud and clear that healthcare is worth the fight. Millions of Americans not being able to afford health insurance next year is simply not acceptable. And again, it'll drive costs up on everybody. That's, I think, such an important point, Rachel, Lauren, that we have to keep making is that It's not just those on the Affordable Care Act who will be impacted. They may be impacted the greatest or the most obviously because they're going to get letters saying what their premiums will be next year. But if you have any form of health insurance, the costs will go up because, again, the millions of people who will be uninsured, they're going to have to be absorbed into the system. Their acute care needs, their hospitalization needs, the emergency room care, all that gets absorbed into the system, which means everybody else has to foot the bill. That's on top of the changes or the impact on Medicaid and on Medicare that the Republican bill made earlier this summer. And on Medicare, the amount that providers are going to be reimbursed is going to go down roughly 4% this coming year because the Republican bill blew such a massive hole, a $3 trillion hole in the debt. That triggers something called sequestration, which will mean a mandatory $500 billion reduction in Medicare spending over the next decade. So that equates to $50 billion a year, or 4% reduction in provider reimbursement next year. We have no fix for that. And then, of course, on the Medicaid side, we're talking about a scenario where literally 10 million additional Americans are going to be without health insurance. And these are people who are legally eligible for the care, but just don't fill the paperwork out or get through the bureaucratic red tape. For me, all of this, it's just unconscionable that we would do all of that, all that I just said with regard to health care, take millions and millions of Americans' health care away or make it too expensive, all to fund another tax cut where the benefit disproportionately goes to the top, certainly 10%, if not 1%, while middle class and lower middle class families are left paying the bill.
Yeah. And what kind of things that you would say need to happen in order for the negotiating to begin again on these ACA subsidies? Because, as you said, Speaker Johnson has said that, we can do this at a later date. This is a later problem. Democrats have been saying, no, we need to do it now. There's been talks about wanting a permanent extension of them, and Republicans haven't seemed to be super excited about that. And then some Republicans have said we definitely need reform. Maybe we could do a year, like certain things like that. Where do you think we could find negotiations going, and what do you think Democrats would take if they couldn't get a permanent extension?
Well, you don't have to take my word for it or Johnson's. Just look at the date that people are getting the letters saying their premiums are going to double. That's in California, that's today, and throughout the rest of the country, it's later this month. Just look at the date when open enrollment hits. That's November, and those first bills are going to be due for 2026 in December or January timeframe. So, it's not me saying that we can't delay further. It's just the facts are that we can't delay further. People are being impacted by this right now. In terms of what it will take longer term, I can tell you that it's roughly $30 billion a year for the tax credits. So $300 billion over 10 years, give or take. And so I don't think 1 year is sufficient because we're going to be in the same mess a year from now. I think we need some predictability and stability in the health insurance markets. And so I think a multi-year, I wouldn't give you a red line here in a podcast interview, but a multi-year extension, I think is certainly the very least. And I'm one of those that have advocated for a permanent extension. But I think that there are, at least a dozen or more Republicans that have indicated they'd be willing to work with us on this. And it's Mike Johnson who refuses. And at the end of the day, you have the other thing going on, which is Adelita Grijalva from Arizona, the 7th District of Arizona in Tucson. She was elected in a special election, I believe 23 days ago, as of this recording, to succeed her late father, Raul Grijalva, who I served with for many years. And that election is being certified, I believe today or yesterday was certified in the state of Arizona. So there's really no reason for Johnson not to certify Adelita Grijalva, not to call us back, other than, number one, he doesn't really want any sort of bipartisan negotiation. He wants to punt everything over to the Senate on that. And then number two is he doesn't want 218 signatures on the discharge petition to compel the DOJ to release the Epstein files. And this is just the reality of the situation, is that Mike Johnson's putting the interests of those who might be implicated in the Epstein files ahead of the American people and his constitutional responsibility to swear in members as they're duly elected and certified.
Yeah. Well, obviously, there's a lot going on here in DC, but there's also a lot going on in your home state of California. We have a redistricting effort that's coming up on the ballot here in about a month or a little bit under a month. Can you just talk to me about where that is, how your constituents are feeling about that? How much, I mean, there's been a ton of money, a ton of campaigns poured into that, and just kind of what that redistricting effort looks like from your position as a member of the California delegation.
Well, Lauren, you and I have spoken about this before. I don't love any of this, what is happening in the country with regard to gerrymandering. I supported independent redistricting across the country. I thought that California has had the gold standard in terms of independent redistricting, and I think that each state should do independent redistricting. And ultimately, I'll keep fighting for that. But I also live in the real world. And in the real world, what happened is, Governor Abbott in Texas, working with the Trump administration, decided to gerrymander the maps there and, to gain 5 seats. And I think California has a decision to make. Do we roll over and play dead and pretend that didn't happen? Or do we fight back and at least try to level the playing field? And do so in a temporary way. That's the other thing that I think is important to understand, is that the California ballot measure is a one-time temporary response to what Texas did. And it reverts back in California to the Independent Commission come the next normal census and redistricting process. So, all that being said, I already voted yes on that initiative. And again, I wish none of this was necessary, but it is. It is necessary. And look, I wonder where all of this ends. I hope that at the end of all of this process, that Republicans and Democrats alike say, let's get away from this race to the bottom where every state is gerrymandered as much as possible. And that's the other thing, is in California, some people wanted a 52-0 Democratic map. But there was a strategic decision that was made not to go above and beyond what the Voting Rights Act would allow in terms of districts that are consistent with the VRA. Other states did not adhere to those same standards. And, we're talking about compactness and keeping communities of interest together and so forth. The idea here is that any legal challenge to those California maps, should they become the new maps, would be null and void. Whereas I think there are some other maps that are out there in some other states that I think will be and maybe might be successfully legally challenged in the years to come.
Yeah. I mean, you talked a little bit about where does this end, and I've kind of been thinking about that. We're seeing moves from not only Texas and California, but states like Maryland, Indiana, Illinois, and all these states are kind of coming into the redistricting fight. And I was thinking about it now, and that, I mean, with the fight being so big this midterm, is that something that's going to become a norm for voters? Is this redistricting process happening every year as the House kind of remains back and forth with a 1-2 seat majority? These redistricting efforts really do impact Washington drastically, whereas in years past they may not have. Do you see this being an ongoing fight?
I sure hope not, Lauren. I mean, I want to get back to an institution where we actually work together and we try to solve problems for the American people. And ultimately, it requires compromise. It requires driving towards consensus. And the more gerrymandered these districts get, the harder it is to envision a scenario where people are willing to compromise, just in general. Every bill, so I've been here now 7 years, and we've gotten 34 bills signed into law by both Donald Trump and by Joe Biden. And every single one of those bills was bipartisan. And I worry that just from a long-term perspective, if all the policy that we're making in this institution, in the Senate, if all those policies are done in a party line vote or through the reconciliation process with a simple majority, that there's no durability to the policy anymore. And I just think that's the wrong way to go about governing. You would never run a business or an organization like that. You'd want predictability and stability in the long term. I think that we're at a very chaotic, dysfunctional time. And, a lot of it, I think, rests on Johnson's shoulders right now. And it's a result of how he got in. It wasn't that long ago that we were going through the motion to vacate the chair with Speaker McCarthy. Again, I've been here 7 years. I'm not surprised by a whole lot that I see, but that day really did surprise me. I did not think that Republicans were going to oust McCarthy. And then you'll both recall that Johnson was not the first, second, or third choice of the Republican conference, right? So Scalise, Jordan, and Emmer, none of them could get the votes. So Johnson was the fourth choice. And I think Johnson, his basic achievement here has been survival. And I think part of the reason that he doesn't want his members back is that I think a lot of them are going to talk about extending the ACA tax credits. And I think Johnson knows that if that actually were to happen, if there was a bipartisan bill to extend the credits, I think that'd be the end of his speakership. I think there would be those on the far right who would move to vacate the chair if some kind of deal like that were actually brought to fruition. And I think that's the reality of where Mike Johnson's at. I think the other piece of this is that individual members are on the Republican side are afraid to speak out. They're afraid to get sideways with the administration on anything because they know that Mike Johnson at the end of the day is not going to have their back. Mike Johnson is going to have Donald Trump's back. And when you have a president who's willing to be very vindictive, who's willing to go after his enemies on social media, primary the people in his party that he declares not MAGA enough or loyal enough, creates a horrible, horrible dysfunction. And, Johnson is willing to go along for that ride with Trump rather than risk his speakership. And it's a sad state of affairs for the country as a result.
I think that's interesting because during the shutdown fight, we have seen, the kind of the further right Freedom Caucus members really getting behind Johnson. Like they have done a couple of press calls with us reporters talking about how, we fully support the speaker. He's doing the right thing. And I think it's really interesting that you bring that up because if he does come back to the House, there's going to be some hard choices to be made in terms of House GOP leadership because not only do you have the Epstein files discharge petition with Adelita Grijalva becoming the 218th signature. And then you also have the ACA tax credits, which you will probably, as you said, see bipartisanship, and you could probably get a huge group coming together that wants to do that. But is that going to be then at the expense of some of these more fiscal conservative, further right members coming in and getting rid of him, which I feel like wouldn't surprise me given the chaos of Congress. But do you foresee that maybe when Congress finally comes back into session and we're tackling those things, could you see potentially another speakership fight happening that would just kind of throw all this up into the air again?
Well, I think it's inevitable at some point, Rachel. Either that or the election occurs and we have a new speaker because of the election. But the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act is what ultimately led to Kevin McCarthy's ouster, right? And that, drove the deficit down by, I think, 1.6 trillion over 10 years. I mean, it was in many ways was a very conservative bill, but it wasn't good enough. And, if Johnson were to want to cut a deal with us, let's say, 2-year, 3-year, 4-year extension of those tax credits, I think it would easily get 300 plus votes in the House. But it also would probably lead to Mike Johnson losing his speaker's gavel as well. And that's a calculation that he's going to have to make. At the end of the day, what I also think could happen is the Senate Republicans will begin to hear from their constituents about the healthcare premiums doubling in the red states, just like they're going to double in the blue states. In fact, based on what I've read, Texas and Florida are the two states with the highest per capita number of ACA recipients. And so the most people as a percentage of population who will be impacted by the premiums going up are those in Florida and in Texas. And so if the Florida delegation, if they start hearing from people, if the Texas delegation, they start hearing from, I'm talking about their constituents now. Now, here's the other part of this. None of these guys are doing town halls. One said they wouldn't do a town hall in person ever. And so how are they supposed to hear if they're not paying attention to what their constituents are saying? because they're afraid of what their constituents might say, or they're afraid of a contrary opinion. I mean, I've done one a month now since I started in 2019. I think we're up to 126, something like that, 127 town halls. And every one of them, inevitably, I'll have people who disagree with me. But that's part of the job. That's the whole point. You're supposed to represent not just the people who voted for you, but everybody. And I worry that more and more of my colleagues, in not doing town halls and not even showing up here for weeks at a time, give me a break. I mean, it's a total abdication of the job that they swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States, and I just think they're mailing it in, and the voters ought to recognize that. If these folks won't actually do their jobs, they ought to find a new line of work.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. You too. Good to be with you.
Yes,
Bye.
thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to our Q&A block, our favorite part. And we are now going to be answering questions from Jane and Emily.
Love it. Well, you've been following the New Jersey governor's race pretty closely. Can you talk a little bit about where those things are as the election is coming very quickly?
Well, basically, Donald Trump is throwing his full weight behind the Republican nominee. His name is Jack Ciattarelli. And what is interesting, I think, about that is that there are two governor's races happening in 2025. And it actually a couple weeks, which is kind of nuts. And
Crazy.
part of that is the fact that in Virginia, there is a Republican candidate. It's the Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Earl-Sears. Trump has not endorsed her. So in these two races, he's made an endorsement in one and not the other.
Which is huge.
Which is
a
huge.
Trump endorsement is massive in any election.
And it's helpful for Republicans, especially in an off year where Trump's not on the ballot.
Yeah.
So Republicans already are going to have a deficit of trying to get their voters out. That's just historically how it's been. Democrats are better about getting their voters out in a midterm election than Republicans are.
And I mean, whatever president is in power, typically it is harder for them to message in a midterm just because they do so much in the first half of their presidency.
Right. And so, and especially now when this is just the first year of the, not even a full year of Trump's second term, you know, this will be kind of an early bellwether on how the agenda is being accepted by other voters.
Totally.
And so what I think is very interesting about it, though, is that he hasn't endorsed Earl-Sears, who is like, you know, Ciattarelli's Republican counterpart in Virginia. And I think that what I've talked to with strategists, and just from my own like journalistic opinion, I think that when Trump is looking at these candidates, Earl-Sears is just a weaker candidate. And that's for several reasons. She's going up against Spanberger, Abigail Spanberger, who is just all around a great get for Democrats. She knows how to be a great politician. She speaks eloquently. She doesn't really succumb to drama. And I think Earl-Sears, the problem is that she's been kind of sucked into this like drama, loud, screaming campaign on ads or whatnot. And I think that just people are kind of over that. They're getting fatigued from just the crazy members that have these random ass stories coming out about them.
And I mean, I think that following up on Glenn Youngkin it's a hard follow as a Republican in the state.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, Glenn Youngkin was incredible candidate quality, as is Abigail Spanberger. And I just think that, like, following up on someone like that is hard.
It's hard. And so I think that in New Jersey, Republicans have a better chance in their eyes of flipping that governor's seat to be red. Trump did lose the state in 2024, but he made marginal gains more than he did in his 2016 election. So I think that they're seeing New Jersey as the place to put all of their focus in. And so I will actually be traveling there in a couple weeks to kind of see. I know, to see. I've never been to New Jersey, so if you're watching and you have tips, send them.
I do.
You have tips, send them to me. But I'm excited to see kind of the ending of this race.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
It'll be interesting to see then what happens in 26.
I love election days, but we're also nerdy.
But we're nerdy, yeah, so maybe not everybody is like, woohoo! And then this question from Emily is kind of a different thing about our reporting lifestyle. It is, what is on background, on the record, and off the record? And you had said earlier that we talked to staffers on background.
Yes.
So real quick, what is on background versus on the record versus off the record?
This is an incredible question because I didn't know any of this really going into journalism.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, off the record. Like, people make off the record comments all the time. Like, it's a joke here and there. I've sat down with people or like friends off the Hill and they're like, this is off the record, right? I'm like, we're hanging out as friends.
I'm like, also, nothing you were going to say is important anyway.
Also,
no
tip to our viewers, if you sit down on a date with a reporter and you say this is off the record, like, it's not funny.
They should get up and leave. Like that's just what should happen.
That has happened to me before. Don't do it.
No.
But, okay, so off the record means that anything that they tell us as reporters is not reportable. So we cannot put any of it in our stories. And if we do, then those sources will see us as not trustworthy and will not tell us things anymore.
Yeah.
So you don't just get an off-the-record tip or like an off-the-record comment and report on it, because you need to build trust with your sources in order to get information on anything else.
Yeah.
So like, you don't want that trust to be broken, or else you won't get stories or information and people won't want to give it to you. So that is the importance of like holding off-the-record stuff actually off the record. On the record, and the opposite is anything that they say is free reign. Like, we can put their name, we can directly quote them, and we can report anything that they tell us on the record. So they'll send us a quote from their boss on the record. Both of us will put that quote directly into our story, and we will cite that member, where they're from, what party they are, all of the above.
Yeah.
Background is a little bit different. It's like an in-between of the two. It's when staffers, like we said this week, we were getting comments about how they weren't happy with where the shutdown was. They don't necessarily want their name or their boss's name out there, or maybe even their party out there sometimes, just to kind of protect them. They speak in anonymously? Anonymously? Yes. So that they can speak freely without kind of holding their tongue, which is nice sometimes, because background information allows us to report on things happening that members don't necessarily want to put their name on, that is happening but could get them in trouble. I know that we reported on stuff that staffers or members have said.
Even members, a lot of members do on background, and they are fine just being a House Republican said or a House Democrat said. And I think it's a good way for them to share their feelings about stuff without having leadership scan their story and say, why did you tell this outlet that you hate us, basically?
Yes. It gives us really candid information without it being completely traceable. And also using sources how they want to be used on background is also another sense of trust. Like, if they are being candid and giving us things that we can report on that isn't necessarily putting their direct name on it but is reportable, like, that is helpful information for us whenever we are just trying to like understand a story and try to make the story better and like the flow better and like just help the story grow from beyond what typical messaging is. Background is really important. So like, obviously respecting and knowing the three of those things is one of like the biggest parts of our job.
Yeah.
But I didn't really ever understood that. Like, I think whenever I read stories before I was a journalist, I was like, why is this person anonymous? Like, that makes it kind of sketchy. But it's really just so they feel that they can speak freely without having any repercussions. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
And as always, make sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on X, and as always, make sure to read at WashingtonExaminer.com.